I wanted to take some kind of risk. Sales was such an unnatural thing to me. I started creating crap content and building awful links. If you find the right person, find a way to afford them. There's very little out there that will really teach you to deal with financial anxiety. You can be the person that shares other people's ideas, or you can publish your own. Hi everyone, you're listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know I started this podcast because over the years I've had hundreds of the most inspiring conversations of my life with small business owners, and they really helped me grow and scale my own business and get my mindset right even when times were really tough. I wanted to capture those conversations and make them available to other small business owners who are following in my footsteps, and I've just got a small request. If you enjoy this episode, if you find it really inspiring, if you find it helps you in your own business, then please just like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The more subscribers we get, the more we can invest in making the podcast better. So enjoy the episode.
Hi, I'm Steve Quinn. Welcome to the Unrelenting Drive podcast. And I'm joined here today by actually the host of the podcast, Nishi, Patel. Nishi, welcome.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me onto my own podcast to be interviewed.
I thought it was about time, wasn't it, that everybody heard about your unrelenting drive and some of your stories.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to sharing that. And just before we go into this, what are we drinking here?
What are we drinking? All right, so this is a productivity drink. It's a drink to help improve focus. It's from Chris Williamson, who hosts a fantastic podcast called Modern Wisdom. What do you think?
Yeah, it's good. What is that? Passion fruit. And
it's orangey.
Okay, yeah.
But I've been drinking it all week. It's literally just come out. I've been drinking it all week, and I mean, it definitely gives you a buzz.
But you're always buzzed. Like, so what have you replaced? Like, is that on top of what you normally take? Or?
I replaced an espresso.
Okay, all right.
And
excellent.
what I found is there's definitely enough caffeine in it. As a friend of mine pointed out, I think there's 50% more caffeine than in a Red Bull.
We're having heart palpitations.
We're going to have to be doing, air squats or something like that just to work through it.
It's all right. Yeah, I'm looking after the girls tonight. Well, my wife's gone up north to view some stars, stargaze, I guess, with a friend. So
amazing.
Yeah, I'll need the energy. It's even if I've got excess energy after the podcast.
She's going to be excited to have daddy time.
Yes, absolutely. So now this is going to be interesting because I'm going to have to be the interviewee. So I'm thinking, like, what is it, 28 podcasts in, if I can actually just switch that part of my brain off and just be compliant while I'm interviewed.
Don't be compliant. Well, most business owners, I think, become business owners because they're non-compliant, right? Where they're a little bit maverick, possibly rebellious, but they want life on their own terms. I think that's why a lot of business owners get into it. And that's probably a great place to start, which was, and we've spoken about it before, but how did you set up an accounting? What was your journey, and what was your why behind it as well, buddy?
Amazing. So should I just, I went to school like many people, and after doing some A-levels, I ended up going to university, did a degree in chemistry with enterprise management, which was actually quite an interesting degree because you get this whole analytical side behind understanding chemistry, understanding the formulas. And actually, I think doing well at chemistry makes you good at cooking because if you can make paracetamol, you can make like a flan. Or a tort, or anything else. Fish tacos, like 31 ingredients in that, however many ingredients in. But I digress.
I'm looking forward to trying those fish tacos, by the way.
Yeah, well, they do seem to come up in conversation quite a lot. And ultimately, I did this chemistry degree, but it was just something I really didn't enjoy doing because I was stuck in labs like for quite a lot of it, and then I was stuck with people who were great in a lot of ways, but they weren't the kind of people I'd normally get on with. So, well, maybe that's harsh. Maybe it's just got to make the right effort to get on with them because I didn't find the subject interesting enough. But the other side of what I did like was the enterprise management. So the qualification I did, it was around helping people who were good with a science background actually set up pharmaceutical companies. Because, we look at companies like Pfizer and AstraZeneca and think like, wow, they're huge, but they all had to start somewhere. And there's, quite a lot of really small pharmaceutical startups throughout the country. So this qualification was designed to help people, scientists who typically don't have business skills, gain business skills. And then I got to the end of that qualification and I was like, hey, I really enjoyed all the business related modules I did, but I hated all the chemistry related stuff. Is there a way I could just do business? Yeah. And then, I looked into management accounting. I wanted to do management accounting because it's really, really heavily business focused. Like a lot of other types of accounting are like, oh, make sure you claim the right expenses, make sure like your balance sheet's perfect. I mean, we do all that as well, but this was all about make sure whatever numbers you create are used for something valuable. And that's something that really appealed to me. So about 3 years later, I'd become a chartered management accountant, and then I had about 3 jobs, I think, and worked my way up. And those jobs get me some really good accounting skills. But more importantly, like in those jobs, I ended up the last 2 I ended up sat within a board essentially. Like I was a junior member of the team, but surrounded by like the sales director, the commercial director, the managing director, and just being in that little pod. In hindsight, I probably would have worked for free, although I did have a decent salary. But working in a company like Fazenda, for example, in the home retail group, where you're just surrounded by those people, overhearing those conversations, it just like skyrocketed my development. But then eventually, I got to a point where I think I left Fazenda, went to the home retail group, and then I think culturally it probably wasn't the best fit for me because there was I worked with some really amazing people, but there was certain things where I knew I wanted something else, so I wasn't completely engaged with it, and I realized I was quite young at that point. I wanted to take some kind of risk, so I handed my notice.
How old were you then?
I was 29. Okay. I was 28 when I'd handed my notice, and I had to do a 3-month notice. So by the time I finished my 3-month notice, I'd just turned 29, and then I started Northants Accounting Limited. So there's always a bit of confusion. What's this business called? We always call it N Accounting, but actually it's Northants Accounting. The N stands for Northants, not Nishi, but it could stand for Nishi. Who knows? And then, that was like 10 years ago, because obviously we're talking about our 10th birthday party coming up next month. Yeah. And so 10 years in, my first month focused on building a website, and then I had some business cards printed, I believe, and then I went to the local, the local place where all the pharmacies, and what do you call it when it's not a shopping centre, but it's like a local town centre. But I remember being in Blackingmore in near West Hansbury, and I remember just handing out some business cards, and I was just like, I was so awkward back then, because I'd like pretty much like stick my head in the shop, throw my business card in and neg it, because it was like sales was such an unnatural thing to me.
So in the jobs that you had, there was never any direct sales, because it was all on the accounting side.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. Although I worked with salespeople and like merchandisers and buyers, and there was a commercial imperative. But me, like when you go from that to like knocking on doors, and it is not something I took too well. But then in the end, I kind of gave up on it, and then I barely had any money at that point. But I just spent like what little money I did on like a telemarketer. So it was a bit of a risk. But
that was hire number one.
It was, yeah, and that was about I think 3 months in actually, and it was one of Deepa's cousins initially, and she was really, really good at it. But she called in 6-7 of the first 10 days.
But still remember?
But the three she did work. She got me I think 6 or 7 clients.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know why she doesn't do it for a living, but that was back then. Like, hey, I'll give you £7 an hour, just make these calls.
Out of interest, where did client number 1 come from?
Client number 1 came from me sending out a letter saying, hey, I'm a local accountant, need clients and want to work with you, and I'm great at this stuff. And that was a salon in Findon. So I bought like a local data list of businesses that were setting up, and started writing to them.
Wow.
I mean, scale's an interesting thing. There, I probably sent out 50 letters and got maybe a couple of clients out of it. But then now our team just sent out 1,600, and we're doing the follow-up phone calls, and we've already potentially got one client out of it. But well, we haven't finished sending out the 1,600. It's I mean, Ellie, do we have a tax guide in the shelf? Yeah, we do. So before it was just like a basic letter, whereas now we're actually sending out copies of our tax guide.
I'm going to need one.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Thank you.
Because, content is king. So that's like a 30-page guide, which just explains everything that you need to know about limited company tax and finances, and not a thing more. So, condensing 15,000 lines of tax code into 30 pages. The writing is a readable size.
That must have been
obviously.
fun.
It's an ongoing labour. I started in 2018, and then every couple of years we update it. So, but it's one of those assets, and we get some really good feedback from it. We've got clients in the past from it. You can be the person that shares other people's ideas, or you can publish your own. So we've always wanted that originality. So yeah, client number one, just writing letters. Clients like probably 5 to 7 or whatever, it just came from calling local businesses, getting those meetings booked in, and then that's when I started thinking, wait, this SEO stuff I keep reading about, there's something to it. I'd already built my website, built it on Wix, which any SEO expert will tell you is awful for SEO. And then but I had so much time back then, so I was like, how do I get this website to rank number 1 on Google? So I was like, so I read about all this link building stuff and all the content and stuff. So I started creating crap content and building awful links, and we started ranking. About 9 months into when I started the business, I'd say about October 2014, we were number 1 for accountants in Northampton.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're about number 11 at the moment, because when we did have a rebrand at some point where we went from northantsaccounting.co.uk to naccounting.co.uk, and unfortunately not all the SEO potential was transferred with the new domain, but I won't bore you with that. But then the amount, we've lost out on not that ranking, although we've got an SEO team working on it now and they're doing really well and it's moving back up. But at least we save a lot of time not having to write Northants Accounting all the time, and we can just hyphenate that like you. But and then a lot of our clients came from networking, a lot of them came from many other sources. So that's how we build. I mean, at the moment, N Accounting, we've got 9 members of our team, although at the moment I believe there's 10 just at the moment. But it's not meant to be 9 authorized members of the team, and essentially we look after about 120 clients at the moment. I think for accountants that's not a huge amount, but actually these are larger businesses, so they need we provide quite a comprehensive level of support on quite a lot of them. So that's us, how I got from 0 to where we are now.
Listen, man, it's impressive, right? We spent time together, and I've spent time with the team, and I think what you've built is really impressive, and it's on an upward trajectory as well. What I was curious about was, what was the driver, or what were the drivers for you as you were making that decision? So after your management accounting qualification or degree, what was the click that made you say, I want to set up my own firm?
Yeah, I think ultimately my last experience as the home retail group, I kind of really got to understand the politics behind larger businesses like that, and I wanted to create something which was free of politics, really, free of influence apart from just logical business decision making, and also somewhere where I could just work in a way I wanted. And for me, I kind of but even in jobs where I was doing well in the past, I never quite felt at home. I always felt horrified. I could have had my best days at some of the businesses I worked at, and I'd still feel horrified that this is what I was meant to do for the next, 40 years. Oh, yeah. And for me, I was young then, but I was still aware that actually I needed my life to mean something. Not that people who work in larger organizations don't mean anything. That's because a lot of it's perception, right?
Absolutely.
Like for me, I wanted. There is another reason which I can delve into a little bit, but that's something I only really discovered a few months after I'd started. But the main one was the freedom. So if you've seen that John Warrilow interview with Patrick Bet-David, and he's talking about the 3 types of business owner. He talks about the artisans, people who are just really, really good at something. They just want to be good at it, regardless of how well their business is doing. He talks about the freedom fighters who just want to be able to do things in their own way. And then he talks about the mountain climbers, like, the Elon Musks or the Jeff Bezoses, where they don't care who owns the business as long as it's amazing. And for me, I was that freedom fighter. I did grow up in a small business, and unfortunately that business didn't do well. Like, it was a corner shop where Tesco's opened up next door, and because of that, we had quite a hard life growing up. But one of the things that always stuck with me was when my father genuinely needed help from his accountant, like a proper conversation, like just basic pricing advice, basic advice on margins. Like, his accountant was like, sorry, I can't help, and then double the fees, which still came out of the very little we did have. And I was very aware, quite early on into this type of industry, that actually there's a lot of people out there who do care about their clients, definitely, but there's a lot out there who aren't really interested in providing the support a small business needs. I think one of the sad things about our industry is actually there's a lot of accountants who do want to do more, but they don't always know how to do more as well. So then they end up just going down this usual thing of, oh, did you know you can put your phone bill through your business and save £10? Or did you know you can change the mileage rate you claim from 5p a mile to 8p a mile on electric cars? That's really important. We talk about that too, but it can't be the only thing you talk about. So I wanted to I worked so hard to create something where having a conversation about business growth and profitability is the norm. Yep. Not just about the tax savings. And some people love it, some people hate it. And we've lost clients because of it, but we've gained clients because of it. And it's something that's always going to happen. There's a lot of people that want accountants to stay in their lane. Yep. But the perception of an accountant's lane, in my opinion, is warped. I don't understand how a larger business can talk about how essential their finance team is and their KPIs and their numbers every month, whereas smaller businesses are more than happy to just have those numbers 9 months after the year end. Maybe they're not happy to do it, but they think it's the only way. It's not the only way. And that's something I really am driven to dispel and provide a better alternative on.
So it's that value proposition, isn't it? Because like you say, there are accountancy firms that will just stay in their lanes. And then there are those who will actually go the extra mile. And one of the things I've found as well is the great thing about the extra mile is there's not many people there. There's no traffic, right? So at what point did you decide things have kicked off? You started to get some clients. You're hiring telemarketers. At what point did you decide, all right, I need to build this team and I want to, diversify this accountancy firm a little bit more?
I think, well, if you include telemarketers, we started hiring really 3 months in. And then we had someone else who was telemarketing. They stayed with us for quite a bit longer and she did really well. But our first accounting member of staff was about 15 months in. And you know what? It's so in terms of scaling the accounting side of the business, probably 15 months in. But I think what's more important is how I made that decision to bring them in, because I was I landed a client, and actually a very good friend of mine from school, and he had a business, and he was like, "Oh, you've got an accounting firm. I don't know why I'm dealing with these other accountants I hate, like the other side of the country, when you're just down the road." And he's a great client even up to now. And he had an old school friend of him, his doing his bookkeeping for free for work experience.
Okay.
And
result.
And I was chatting to her, and it was just she wanted to get ahead. She had a young family. She wanted that experience so she could, like, in this day and age, it's impossible to even get people to work for money. No, not our team, they're great, but many people out there, they're struggling. There's like the attitude in this day and age. It's like you can pay people well and they still won't want to do the work. But like, this was someone who was working for free, Cheryl, and I thought, well, you know what? There's something really powerful in someone who's working for free and just wants to get that experience. So, I've never had people work for free in our firm, but I offered her like further work experience working with me, where she'd get a bit more accounting related experience. But it wasn't. I never thought, hey, I've hit a capacity here. Oh, I'm wearing too many hats. In hindsight, I was wearing too many hats, as anyone starting a business does.
100%.
But when I met her, it was there's just something about the attitude here which I need to surround myself by, and that's actually gone in. That same mindset's gone into every hire since then. There was not quite every hire, but every hire that's worked out well in the long term. It's the only attitude we have now. Like, why do people want to work with us? And ultimately, like, this is we've talked about this a lot. Like, I've done a load of videos on it. First who and then what. Yeah. And this is just that mindset we've had as a business, like, throughout like the last 10 years. Yeah. If you come across a good quality person that wants to work hard, like, you'd have to be a really bad business owner not to get a return off it.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If it's the right person, you'll always at least get their salary back in one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree, right? Mindset, beliefs, core values are not things that perhaps have been developed through education. Some people are just born that way. I think some people form those attitudes through struggle, right? Like you growing up, same with me growing up. But to be able to spot the attitude and then decide, well, hang on a second, let's give this person a shot. And then presumably she came on board and it developed from there?
Yeah, so she became she was never a full-time member of staff because she had a young family, but actually, like, she let me do some amazing things. Like, I went to Australia for like 3 months while I was running the business, and she was like doing a lot of the day-to-day work, whereas I was managing the client relationships. She helped train quite a few members of the team you see amazing in the business right now.
Amazing.
It was a good relationship, and then I helped her, although she did all the hard work, but set up her own bookkeeping business because it was one of those things. In hindsight, back then, I could never quite afford to employ her full time. So, she needed more money, and we couldn't fund it at that time. So I helped her set up her own bookkeeping business, and now eventually she got to a point where that bookkeeping business grew, and then she kind of had to make a decision, like, continue working with us part time and do that, or just focus on that. And then we parted. Although we still work on clients together at the moment, and we still keep in touch. So that was like our first like proper members staff, because the telemarketers were always doing like short-term contracts, but she was with us for about maybe 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just the right person at the right time and seizing that opportunity. It's been a good foundation of the business, and then we've had other great team members join us since then,
and just continue growing. So where's the business at today? 10 years in, right? And I definitely want to look back on some of your key learnings as well. But where's the business at right now if we take a snapshot?
Yeah, so I think as an overview of the business, I kind of described the size of the business earlier on, but as an overview, we have two main offerings. We have our compliance solution, which means like getting all the bookkeeping done. It means getting all the accounting and tax work done, supporting people on their accounting software, making sure they're getting the most of it, making good quality decisions on that side. But the next level up from that is the Apex program, which is kind of plastered on the banners behind you. But that's our solution in terms of financial management. Like if you think about all these large businesses where they've got finance teams doing bits of bookkeeping, doing bits of accounting work, putting reports together so the management team can make better decisions. Well, this is the solution we created to offer it to small businesses, because ultimately, like businesses need their numbers every month, and they need to be looking 3 years ahead. And that's your typical accountant, where they're getting the accounts and tax work done like 2 months or a month before the deadline. Like the point you do some accounts the month before the deadline, you're looking at a period that ended 8 months ago, and part of that period could be 20 months old. And it's just the Apex program is like a replica of everything I use in terms of my own financial management that I've been doing for the last 10 years to actually support businesses. So, one of the first key components is businesses need to know where they are today. How much money are they making? What is it currently worth? How much money is the owner taking home? Then what they need is they need to have a plan. Like, where do they want to be in 3 years time, 4 years time? What do they want their business to be worth? What do they want to be taking home? And once you know that, you know the gap. And then the cash flow is like the journey there, because one of the biggest challenges is a lot of businesses, they grow based on constraints. Like someone will leave and the owner will be like, oh crap, we don't have enough staff. So let's hire someone. Or someone, they might have just got a new job in, and they don't have enough staff to fill it, so they'll grow that way. And they're always on the back foot with their growth. And the whole point of the Apex model was, instead of them hitting a constraint in their business and hiring the next person, we want them to have complete awareness of how much spare cash they have at any point. So then they can use all of that spare cash to then go and hire the next person without the constraints. And if you grow that way, that means you can be more proactive about embedding people into your team and integrating them and training them. And you have better spare capacity, which means as a business owner, typically you have less stress and pressure.
Yeah, massive. And it's, like you say, is that constraint kind of attitude towards running a business as opposed to an attitude of abundance. So, and because most small business owners don't have that financial education or perhaps that financial awareness, they definitely have the financial anxiety, right? Which we've talked about before. But because they don't have that, I guess that's where Apex comes in and really provides that kind of level of detail and that support.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what motivates you to keep growing this business?
Yeah, this is a really good point. I think I was talking to Emma Spears actually from Ballyhoo PR the other day, and we were having a bit of a discussion about it, because ultimately you can there's times in your business where you're comfortable, and it's easy to grow when you have nothing, and actually going from 0% to 1%, I guess, is 100% growth, or going from one client to 2 clients is still 100% growth. But then, going from 120 clients to 130, what motivates you? I think the answer, it has multiple components to it. There's, I guess, the biggest driver is once you get the right people in your team, you are focused on retaining them. And two of the main methods to retain someone is make sure you're making enough money as a business to essentially be able to keep up with their salaries. It's even more prevalent in the accounting industry, where people are moving through qualifications, and someone who might have started with us on 12 grand 5 years ago might be on 27 now. And a lot of it, a lot of accounting firms do struggle because they end up spending all this money training good members of staff, and then because they haven't managed their pricing properly with their clients, because they've been undercutting a bit too much, maybe because they haven't grown their client base enough. They can't actually pay these members of staff what they need, and because of that, they end up losing good quality members of staff. So there's always that imperative that we need to make sure that the client base and size of it and the value of it keeps up with members of our team who are progressing. But part of it as well is like, you want to grow your team because it means more senior members of your team then got opportunities to mentor and develop people themselves. So that is quite an important one. So I'd say that's one reason. The second one is just help more people. Sorry,
I was just going to say something that you've just reminded me of. There is great leadership creates more leadership, and that's what you're talking about, is growing your team, and within that, creating more leadership for each of them to continue growing your team.
There's definitely a component of that. Definitely, I mean, that's a major component because. I think everything from a tax point of view and a technical point of view, we've created content on to some extent. It's out there. It's in that guide. It's in so many different formats, and our team have been keeping up with it, and they know quite a large part of what I technically know, although they still need direction in terms of its application at points. But what's amazing is like, the things they're resolving without me. Like quite often they grow so much more if I'm out of the business, because they actually stop and think, and where it's not easy, just access me and ask me the easy way around. They will develop, and the kind of queries they can handle without my involvement is really good. But so quite a lot of my time and energy, it does go into mentoring, I think, in terms of leadership element. Like at the moment, a lot more of my conversations are like, especially with like Holly and Becky, like our accounting manager and bookkeeping manager, is, about the management of the workload, managing team members, motivating team members. There is like, delegating as well. Like, that people don't naturally delegate. It's not a natural thing to do.
What do you think that is?
Trust.
Trust is such a big thing on. Don, what's your take on trust and how to build that trust in order to then delegate? Is it delegate first and then build the trust, or trust first and then delegate? What's your take on it?
You've got to have the trust first, but trust comes from alignment to culture. Yeah, in my opinion. So. Like before we really start delegating to members of the team, like that first 3 months, we just want to make sure that cultural alignment exists. We do have a strong culture in the business. It is well documented. And because of that, like it's not fair for me to ask a manager in the business to delegate to that member of the team if that team isn't at a stage where they passed any kind of probation. Yeah. So quite initially our standard probationary period is 6 months, but actually what we're looking for is someone to achieve those milestones in probably 1 or 2 before we can start actually delegating proper responsibility to them. Yeah. And so the trust bit's definitely important. It comes first. But the other side of the trust bit is, like one of the conversations I have quite a lot is, even junior members of the team, they're grown adults. They know, like, a huge part of our culture is integrity. Like, if they say they're going to do something and don't do it, if they say they've done something which they haven't done, there's no place for them in the business, and everyone knows that. And that's not a performance related thing. That's just stick your hand up if you don't know how to do something.
That's a character-based thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And which is why I have no problem in enforcing it rigidly from day one, because it's not about the opportunity you've had to learn in the past. It's not about anything else apart from the attitude you have today.
Right here, right now.
Yeah, so, and because we do that, then we do end up with that trust. But the other side of it is like just letting people know that they're not, like, it's not life and death, right? I mean, I was interviewing Sam Stiles Hudson the other day, and her stuff is life and death, because like if she's a nursing home consultant, and like before that she was a nurse in the RAF and many other things. But if for what we do, quite often there's nothing that can happen in our industry that can't be fixed. It can be a pain in the ass to fix, but
especially if it's to do with HMRC.
Yes, yeah, but I can have a member of my team pissing them off on the phone all day long until they cooperate.
Yeah.
So
that's the secret.
Yeah. So ultimately, like, you know, there's an element of like, if something goes wrong here, as long as we follow the right procedures, we did things for the right reason, then we'll do whatever it takes to fix it, and we'll do whatever it takes to make it right with the client. Luckily, because we got so many checks in place, checklists, like part of the culture as well is like, you know, if you sign off a checklist, you sign that off and you checked everything on it. And I would say compared to like a lot of firms I've seen, and like our error rate is minimal. And also we do a lot of reviewing, you know, 2 or 3 months after. We do regular reviews, spot checks of work that was done like, you know, 6 months ago, just to make sure the right standards are being met, even on things that aren't currently visible.
It's quality assurance. It's part of your value proposition, right? Because not all businesses are going to have that. Just on the trust piece, there's a number of things that I think you've hit on that are paramount for a leader in any business. One of which is the trust piece. And something that I talk about is the trust equation, which is from a great book called The Trusted Advisor. And those elements that you talked about fit in there, which and the equation is credibility times reliability times intimacy over self-orientation. So if you think about the credibility piece, which is you're going to do what you say you're going to do, right? It's about the action. And then the reliability bit is you're going to show up and you're going to be honest, and you're going to demonstrate your integrity. The intimacy bit is perhaps a bit more challenging. And I think that requires both parties opening up and different questions. As you know, I love different kinds of questions. Yes. And then the self-orientation bit is that attitude, which is I'm here to serve you as a client, Mr. and Mrs. Client, or I'm here to serve you as a boss, as a business. And so I'm on your agenda, not on my agenda. And that leads to greater trustworthiness. But what I think is key is that you have to give the trust first before you can expect trust back as well, right? Because it applies to every relationship in business, I think. And then the next part is what you're talking about, which is empowerment, right? Your delegation is effectively empowering and trusting someone to do something for you. And the final bit that you mentioned there is there's a wealth partner who described this to me. She said, we've started celebrating mistakes, not like having a big party, but actually making it okay to make mistakes. Because if one member of the team makes a mistake, everybody learns. And it's okay because you can't get everything right all of the time. Yeah. And that's something that you just kind of touched on there, which is, all right, it's okay. You know, don't worry about it, but don't lie about it. Don't try and hide it. Be honest, be upfront, right? That's integrity.
Yeah, and as you said, it's what you do with the mistake. Like, you know, like usually it's one of two things, like, or one of three things. Although that last thing I said was one of the 3 points I was going to make. So dealing with mistakes anyway. So essentially, like, first thing is you're trying to understand, is it the process or is it the person?
Yeah.
And if it's a process, really, it's about checking, redoing your checklists or understanding what needs to be included or what shouldn't be included in that. And then if it's about the person, it's about understanding, is it a case of the attitude or is it because of their capacity? Yeah. So if it's an attitude or alignment issue, then unfortunately there's only one way to fix that. But if it's often a case of, there are multiple ways of fixing that too, but usually it's one main way. But if it's a capacity issue, then actually there are instances where, like, while as overall as a team we make sure that we're well staffed so we can look after people, there are instances where one member of the team might end up with much bigger burden of work than others. So as part of that, what we do is a regular exercise where we call it our organizational structure, and we go through every single activity that we do in the business and who it's assigned to and how long it should take every month. And then we've got formulas in there, such an accountant way to do it, but we've got formulas in there which essentially say, well, this person's meant to be doing 120 hours of work a month. This person's only got 80 hours of work assigned to them. And then we start moving things around. And we do that as a team, and it works well because, like, actually what we find is people who don't have quite enough stuff assigned to them, they hold their hand up and say, hey, I want more. And then the people who have too much stuff assigned to them hand that over to them. And it means that we're always redistributing the work. But it's important because there's businesses out there where, you know, some people have to work insanely hard and other people barely work, and you end up with that resentment. We're incredibly transparent as a business about where the work lies and who's doing what and why. And, you know, if they come back and say, well, that I've actually got 130 hours of work, and I'm like, well, this says you've only got 80, why is that? And then there's a conversation around, well, that activity is actually taking me 3 hours to do rather than the one in there. So we're like, well, why is it taking 3 hours? And then we might either identify something about our process which is inefficient, or we might identify that actually it genuinely is a 3 hour activity, but we're only charging the client based on one. So there is quite a lot of that.
Got to be forensic. That's what it feels like. You know, there's a level of detail that you apply to the business, right?
Yeah, and I don't know a better way of creating transparency in that area because, you know, we talk about trust a lot. Like, the trust breaks down when one member of the team thinks another member of the team's got a much better deal. You know, less work for more money, all that kind of stuff. So the amount of effort and energy we put into making sure that our pay structures are aligned. You know, there's lots of opportunities where in the past we've lost members of the team because they got offered a job. This is quite rare, but members of the team where they got offered a job paying more money, and, you know, in certain cases I could have found the money to keep them, but then I would have, even though the other members of the team weren't handing in their resignation either, I wouldn't want to create a discrepancy where you've got one, but there's so many businesses out there that do it
a lot.
It's
like of all sizes.
Certain businesses, like the easiest way to get a pay rise is just hand in your resignation and say, I've got another job, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we'll just give you another 25%, we'll match it. But then what happened to all the loyal people who didn't hand in their notice and who didn't just ask for that, and they don't get anything until they do the same thing, and then eventually that business just will start losing its best and most loyal team members, whereas the ones that were less loyal would potentially be left in the business. So there's a lot we've done to just maintain that sense of fairness. I mean, we're an accounting firm, pretty much our whole team has access to Xero. They can see what each other's getting paid. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot I could do to restrict that, but the other side is I'd rather they can see what each other's getting paid, and then I work hard to make sure I justify it.
That is definitely the minority, right, of businesses, because I know businesses I've worked in before, you were contractually restricted so that you were not allowed to talk about your salary to other people. Now, obviously that would break down, but it's one thing talking about it, it's another thing seeing it. But you've come from a corporate financial background where you're gonna see what everyone's getting paid. You'll probably have access to that, but also you'll see what kind of divvies are being paid up the line and all of that sort of thing. I think that's a brave move. That's a really brave move, which is probably one of your principles. And I was curious about what principles do you fundamentally believe in business?
I think it really comes down to three things. I think the first one is, I don't know do you like John Wick? John Wick movies?
I watched John Wick 4 the other week. Love it.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
I love Keanu Reeves.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And I really believe in that because there's time, before John Wick put it in those terms, I kind of had a different way of saying it. You can't be a different person to yourself than you can in front of other people, or you can't act differently with your team than you can with your clients. And I watched John Wick 4 and I was like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I meant to say all these years. But I'd never quite put it in the right terms. But there's so many, there was an example about 2 months ago, and there was this client who, she didn't leave, but she was essentially made her company dormant, and then she didn't cancel the direct debit after doing that. And then there was a bit of confusion with the team because of the timing on it all. And then we ended up charging her for a whole year when she wasn't meant to. And it was and then we found out about it. She didn't find out about it. And we were just doing our own checks and this person's been paying us, but she's not meant to. And I was like, oh great, now we're going to pay her like £1,200 back. And she's actually in Italy, so she was paying us in euros. And but we contacted her. Well, yeah, it's a pain it's a pain. Obviously, then you just got to pay over £1,200 that you didn't know you had to pay over for nothing just because you'd overcharged someone. But we went to them and. But the key thing is, the whole integrity point of culture, and how can I say to the team, actually, she hasn't even noticed. Let's just keep that. If I want them to own up to their own mistakes and own up and make things right, it's so quite often every single that integrity has to be very consistent in the business.
So integrity's number one, or principle?
Yeah, sorry. I would say how you do anything is how you do everything. Because integrity is part of our culture. We call it credibility at the moment, and it's really part of our credibility and leadership subcultures.
Yeah.
But that was just an example of where we had to just go back to someone. And then frustratingly, she came back and said, because of the exchange rate differences, I'm out of pocket like 20 euros. We just gave her £1,200 worth of euros that she didn't even know she had coming to us. And then she was like, oh yeah, you owe me another 20. I was like, fine, just transfer it. But it's fine. You know what? Because she's right to do that. That's genuinely her money. And I mean, that happens so rarely. But the thing is, there's so many other instances where the easy thing is not the right thing. And
easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life. Hard choice to send that money back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Even harder to get the call saying, Nishi, you're 20 euros short.
Yeah, you do have to laugh sometimes. But you owning up to something compared to someone else noticing is the world of difference. And it was really important that she knew that we were the ones that figured it out and went to her. So, I mean, really, but I still think that's the how you do anything is how you do everything part. But the other one is do what 99% of people aren't doing. That's been one of I was saying, even when it was just me on my own, I was like, what are most accountants doing? Identified it and then did the opposite.
Yeah.
Like most accountants aren't blogging. Most accountants aren't writing good quality articles, creating good quality content. And most accountants aren't talking about pricing or cash flow or capacity. So let's do that. And I guess the third one, it's just the right people on the bus. Like I mean, we discussed it earlier, but just if you find the right person, find a way to afford them. Like the example in Good to Great, where they're talking about the 11 best companies, and they're saying like there was times where these companies were losing like tens of millions of pounds, even hundreds of millions of pounds a day.
Yeah. And
they still chose to recruit the best people, even though they didn't know what they were going to do with those people. And that is, in my opinion, just such an important thing. You know, maybe certain people on the outside looking in will say, okay, well, we're inefficient if we do that. But like some of the best people we got in the business, we recruited when we didn't necessarily have a job for them. Mm-hmm. And then because someone else left, and then they did have a job and they did that job better than the person that left in some cases.
Interesting.
And then they improved on it. So it's valuable. I mean, a year ago, it paid off in dividends, because at a point where it was almost impossible to hire. About a year ago, we were putting jobs out there and getting maybe one applicant. Now we're putting jobs out and we get like 20 or 30. So the dynamic is shifting back to normality. But because we had that extra capacity, we had the luxury of saying, well, we're not going to recruit off one average candidate. We'll just wait. And it gave us the opportunity to wait.
I was curious about something, right? You've been running this business for 10 years. If you were to go back, say 10 and a half years, 10 years, what would you tell yourself from a business standpoint? As you're setting up this business, you're looking ahead into the future. You're going back 10 years. What are you going to tell yourself? What are some of the key things that you would say to yourself?
Yeah, the biggest mistakes I've made have always come from a lack of follow through.
Okay.
What do I mean by that? When we've engaged in a marketing campaign, when we've engaged in one particular strategy, there's times where I've stopped it when I was I'd probably done 90% of the work on that strategy, and I just had to hang on to just get that last 10% done, or just be patient. There's times in hindsight, especially things with marketing, where we'd put everything in place, and based on what I know now, we could be 4 times the size, just because I just had to hang on to something a little bit longer, just stick with something just before the point I gave up in the past. So I think there's the one thing I've learned, which I would have been very helpful back then, would be just take a longer term view. Yeah. And more importantly, just pick a handful of things and perfect them. My marketing strategy in the past has always been very spray and pray. And now what we've done is we've come back to the core. We've seen how everything's linked. We've got mutually supporting content and channels. And whereas before it was just like a scattergun approach all over the place. So I think going back at it, and I mean, that's definitely one thing I would say, stick with something if it is working, but it's just not working as well as you want it, because you can improve it rather than just do something else. But the second thing is, I think the culture of a business is really, really important.
Oh yeah. And
the compromises we made in the past on that culture, in hindsight, they've always caused us issues. And I do feel actually there's probably times where I should have used our probationary period better. There's times when I should have looked beyond how much I liked someone and really thought about how they fit in the business more.
How much value they provide, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess, and I think one other thing is actually, sorry, did you ask me for one, or did you ask me for multiple?
As many as you want. It's your podcast, buddy. But I think as many as you can give, because how many people are out there who are on the precipice or have some doubts, and these are nuggets that will be immensely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if someone is just starting out in business, then the whole thing I'm saying about culture maybe not as relevant right now. What I'm saying about hanging in there and just following through on something probably a bit more relevant. But I think people starting out, one of the biggest mistakes I've made is I only started reading business books about 3 years ago. Had I done that 10 years ago, it would be a very different story. So if there's people starting out, one of the things I consistently find between our most successful clients and our least successful clients is the most successful clients talk less and ask more valuable questions and listen more. And to actually, you don't have to believe what everyone says, but to try and gather enough information from people that you are having conversations with. Less successful people I found, they're really eager to give you their opinion. They're really eager to give you advice. Whereas like the most successful people that I work with, they're really eager to ask your opinion and ask for that advice, and then whether they believe you or not, what they'll do is they'll cross-reference it from other conversations they've had and try to see the consistency in that.
Yeah, find the golden thread.
Yeah, so if I was starting out 10 years ago, I'd just get on the business books, watch everything on YouTube about business. There's very little out there that will really teach you to deal with financial anxiety.
Tell me about it.
The financial anxiety of not having a job and not knowing how you're going to pay your bills is pretty substantial. Financial anxiety of having 10 members of staff you got to pay is pretty substantial. I think you got to find healthy ways of dealing with it. But if I do, I'll let you know. But ultimately, you've just got to, even when it's really tough, remember why you started, remember why you're doing it, and have a think about the value of your actual business. A lot of people think about profit, and but they never really think about the equity they built. And if you built a business that's worth £500,000, but you spent 150,000 in marketing and all the other sacrifices you made to do it, are you really hard done by? Like, a business does have value when you build it to a certain level. So I guess I could have been a lot more concise answering that question.
So something that you've just talked about there that I think is paramount for business owners, I think it's paramount for everybody. And Jim Rohn talks about this. He says you can make a living on your job, but you can make a fortune by working on yourself. So you can make a living by working on your job, but you can make a fortune by working on yourself. And that reading business books is fundamentally self-development, right? Because you're building your business brain in doing so. So something that I was curious about, because how we know each other is pretty much through the gym. And you talk about that financial anxiety. Well, just the anxiety of being a business owner is significant, right? Because it's not just staff, it's clients as well, right? It's all of the external regulatory factors that you've got to consider running a regulated business. So what I was curious about is, where do you place personal development as a business owner? So where do you rank it? Does it even, obviously you're reading to build your business brain, as I say, but where do you place personal development? How do you see that? And with the different businesses that you work with, how do you see that with different business owners?
I think at the moment, because I've overdone it probably in the last 3 years, I would say it's not as important to me as team development, because I've learned so much in the last 3 years once I did get on it. But the other side is there's new ideas, new concepts coming out all the time, so I do need to keep it topped up. What I do value though is it's almost like a form of meditation. Like, to steady the business, you have to steady yourself. And it's something that seems to come up for me more and more. Like, sometimes I just go sit in the sauna and steam room, because like, I'm fully aware that actually there's times where I have to make decisions and push the business forward, but then there's times where I have to do nothing. And for me, making the decisions, pushing the business forward is the easy bit. It's the times where I have to do nothing because I don't want to burn out my team, because they've already had a lot of pressure placed on them in terms of development. Those are the tougher bits, and you're always balancing this guilt about not working as hard for the team as they're working for you. Although I do work hard, and there's a lot I do in the weekends and evenings, and the things I think about when I'm not in my 9 to 5, or that people don't obviously see. But
I know I've had those weekend texts.
Yes, yeah. So there's that balance between dealing with that guilt, but also removing yourself from the business. Like, you want to be there for your team, but you also realize they'll grow faster if you're not there. And trying to I still struggle with that bit. Like, if I'm there, I'm like, oh, it's too easy for them to ask me. They're not finding the stuff out themselves, although quite a lot of time they still do now. Whereas if I'm not there, I'm like, do they know I'm supporting them? Like, and that's in terms of development. Like, now it's all about balance. It's for me, the knowledge element. Yeah, it'd be massively arrogant to say I don't have any more knowledge to gain, because every time I read a business book, every time I watch something, I do learn something.
Of course.
Or it might be something I already knew, but it reiterates the importance or gives it a visibility in a way I hadn't looked at it before.
Yeah.
And because of that, then it really sinks in and then I adopt it. But for me, it's just about controlling my own mind these days. But 10 years in, I've seen businesses that have 50 members of staff, 60 members of staff. I'm not saying we've achieved like amazing stuff. We've done some really good stuff, but there's a massive spectrum. There's businesses that have failed. There's businesses that have turning over millions. And ultimately, ultimately for me, I don't view the size of the business as necessarily a success point. I view the quality of the team and the quality of our clients as a success point. But to summarize, there's times to grow, there's times to reflect, there's times to just control your own ambition. And there's times to just be there for the team and let them recover and let them stabilize.
Yeah, and that self-control element, I think, is pivotal. I think that's what we all end up striving for, really, is how do I control my emotional response? How do I slow down my thinking? Because the older I get, the more I realize I used to leverage the quick thinking.
Yeah.
Actually, now I find I've got to slow it down. So give myself time to think. Which is a great coaching model and book as well. But, there's so much in that. And one of the things I was really curious about was, what are your top tips? So you speak to a lot of business owners day in, day out. You've experienced it yourself. I just wanted to ask as well, you told me a statistic. How many businesses actually survive beyond 10 years?
It's about 5%.
5%. So you're talking about your business is doing great stuff because you've already outlasted 95%.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that as a win, definitely. But it's based on very subjective criteria, I guess, because, a business, someone who scales a business to like £20 million in value and sells it after 5 years, they've fallen foul of that statistic.
True.
Someone who has only has like 5 years left to work before they retire, and they build up a very healthy business which gives them everything they want and the lifestyle they want, they've already fallen foul of that statistic. So I do like statistics, but 99% of the time I do like statistics.
And 99% of the time statistics are made up, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and 1% of the time I don't like it. No, just kidding. But obviously, from a marketing point of view, statistics work well. But was it James Sinclair said that? So it was. He's talking about the 5%. But a better question is, how is that 5% calculated? What is that source?
Yeah,
it's when you try and reverse engineer that calculation. So you say something like, well, 1 in 6 people are self-employed or work for themselves, and then 1 in 6 of those are actual business owners with the team. So already that person's 1 in 36 people. Of that 1 in 36 people, I think only 20% of them will ever try to sell their business.
Wow. And
of that 20% that try and sell their business, only 10% of them will achieve that sale. So you are 1/36 times 20% times 10% when you get to Ellie. Do you mind tapping that out on a cap? No, is it?
It's very few.
Yeah, maybe like 0.3%.
Yeah.
But
will actually go on to sell their business. Wow.
But, selling a business isn't it's not necessarily the only mark of success.
It's not the be all and the end all for everybody, is it?
Yeah, the people who close their businesses down after 20 years of running it, and they've saved up all the money they wanted, and they've put it all into their pensions and into the other assets, and then they can have a very happy retirement. They've got enough to help the people that they actually care about. That can be in some ways compared to someone who's like slaved away for 20 years and built a business that they can sell but didn't enjoy a minute of it.
Yeah. Success is so subjective.
It is.
And the archetype of success being 6 figures, nice car, big house, all of that sort of stuff. How many people do you know like that who are unhappy? I know loads of people who are like that, who are unhappy, that work in an ivory tower of broken dreams. So success is totally subjective. But, for the archetypal successful business owner, that which is a business that's making significant profit, has a great culture, has a great team, what are some of your top tips from, the podcasts that you've done, the business owners that you know, from your own experiences? What are some of your top tips for business owners?
Well, I guess really the first thing is just think about what you enjoy doing in the business and what you don't enjoy doing, because that's obviously part of your plan to delegate. But also then think about not necessarily about what you enjoy doing and what you don't. Think about what you're good at and what you're not, and think about how realistic it is for you to upskill at the areas you're not good at. Because if there's something you really want to do, but you're not great at it and you don't want to put the energy into doing it, then you're doing your business and the rest of your team a disservice by continuing in that role rather than getting someone else in to do it. The other element is, and this is something where I'm probably more conflicted than I am in anything else, is the idea about whether you want to borrow to grow your business.
Okay.
And I think a lot of businesses where they are getting to a certain point and they are potentially identifying all these roles that exist. I still believe one of the most powerful things you can do in a business is give someone a role and just let them focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
We've, out of necessity over the years, we've had people wearing multiple hats in the business, and now it's getting more and more specialized, whereas every person, even where instances where we don't quite have enough work for that one person to do in that one role, we find the work, because the work always turns up for some reason. Like so many times we've hired someone and I've worried there won't be enough for them to do, and then within 2 weeks it's just a full role, because we're always identifying things that need to be done either to make our clients' lives better or our lives better.
Self-fulfilling almost, isn't it?
Yeah. But the reality is, if you're running the kind of business where you do want to grow and scale it, and you've got like like a member of your team who's like the marketing person and the salesperson and the administrator, then have a genuine think about from a cash flow perspective what you have to do to just let that one person focus on one particular job. It usually involves either outsourcing or bringing more people in. But the other component of that is, make a decision about how you feel about borrowing. Like there's still a lot of people I come across and they're like, they just won't borrow at all. They're just like, I don't want to be in any debt. And there's obviously a mindset thing going on there, because their parents brought them up to know debt was bad, and debt is bad. Is it bad? I don't think so. But if it's mismanaged or taken on for the wrong reasons, definitely.
If you over leverage as well.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of people Googling what leverage is now. You know what though? It's all about perspective. If you borrow, people are happy to borrow £50,000. Happy to borrow £150,000 to put down on a rental property and then make that 5% yield a year, if they're lucky. Whereas, people are very reluctant to borrow £50,000 to put into their marketing strategy and get like a 3,000% yield a year on the money they borrowed there. And if you analyze what is causing that, it's usually either a lack of faith or a lack of understanding. Ultimately, when you engage in an activity in your business, there's always a way to make it work, if you really believe in it. And quite possibly, where people aren't willing to borrow to grow their business it could well be because they haven't planned something out to the point where they completely believe in it. So instead of going ahead and borrowing when they're not comfortable, what they need to do is go back to the drawing board and get comfortable with an idea. Like ask all the questions they didn't ask before, run all the scenarios they didn't run before, and then go back and then borrow it. Or say, actually, no, that would have been a bad idea, don't borrow. But sorry, so to concisely answer your question in terms of the advice I'd give to someone who gets to a certain stage, if the worst thing you can do is just have, well, this is less concise now, but the worst thing you could have is this halfway house between having that business that runs without you and not quite having it. I think when you get to about 12 members of staff, that's where the business starts to get unwieldy. But the challenge is when you've got like about 12 members of staff, you've kind of semi-detached yourself from the day-to-day running, and then having to get drawn back into it at times can be really difficult to readjust your mindset on. So if to summarize, go big or go home.
I love that. And you know, it's about risk appetite in terms of the debt piece specifically. There's good debt and there's bad debt, right?
Absolutely.
And it's your risk appetite based on, like you said, is do you have faith in where you're actually going? And risk all boils down to fear, right? And again, fear is totally subjective. And most people have a fear of loss, have a fear of, having that, you know, ball and chain around your neck of bank and debt and interest. And if you understand compounding, you know that that's going to hurt, right? But good debt and bad debt, I think that's the key. And most people assume that it's just bad. But good debt is debt that's going to make you more money. Fundamentally, that's it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's what you do with that debt. Yeah. We've had a client that borrowed like, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds and then paid himself a gigantic bonus and bought a boat. And he's not a client anymore because we did disagree on certain things. Yeah. And but the reality is, like, if you do that and you fail, and you probably are going to feel bad because you in hindsight, you probably realize you made bad quality decisions. Whereas if you put it into getting good quality members of your team and you do various things and then you fail, you're probably still going to feel bad. But the other side of it is, like, I think, commercial lending at the moment, the rates are higher than they've been for a very long time. One thing that's actually catching business owners out is just the amount of the monthly payment that's just paying off the equity on it. So, you know, you borrow £200,000 or maybe 150 and you're paying $3,500 a month. Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got to go and actually spend it to go grow your business and make money. Like, if you borrow 150 grand, not a lot of it is actually available for investment because a lot of it's you've got to hold back to actually just make the payments on it. So I don't know what the right and wrong answer is actually, but I do know that getting the right people on board, that's one of the key points. I would actually just say something as well. In the past, you know, there's always this argument about, do you outsource or hire a larger team or improve your team? And I've always tried to treat our suppliers as members of our team, but then I guess we don't hold them to the same standards, or we try to, but it doesn't always work that way. Of course. But with suppliers, to some extent, I do have a lot of loyalty to our suppliers. It's important. I do want the best for them, and I want to make sure that they remain healthy businesses. We do things like pay early. We do many things like there's even many cases where I've had to go back to suppliers and say, look, you need to give us a price increase. I know it sounds mad, but actually, just like, if I analyze their business, I'm like, how can they afford to eat charging us this amount? Because I understand the industry averages to some extent. It's something I see, maybe they don't. But that's important. But when you've got members of your own team and the members of your team you like that are aligned, you're a lot more patient with them. You're more patient with the strategies. Like what I've seen in the past is, like, when people use external marketing companies, like they might give it 3 months and then give up, because that's like another business that they don't have that loyalty to. When you've got people in your team, you know, you probably give it 2 years, because it's, if you know they're the right people, and but the fact that you'd give it 2 years, or the fact that you'd give it a much longer period of time, or anything else you do in the business, that is often like what I said earlier about people giving up too early, or me giving up too early when on certain things. Once we started doing things in-house rather than outsourcing them for certain things, I was automatically playing a longer game just out of loyalty to the members of the team that we had. And that longer game has often been what's given us the results.
Yeah. And you know, you need to play long-term games with long-term people in long-term industries. But I also think, you know, that Aristotle quote around patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet, I think is, you know, often is really what you're referring to. I had an incident with me and my business last August, and an entrepreneur that I know who, interestingly enough, was just looking at borrowing money to invest in marketing, to really take the business to another level. He gave me the loving boot that I needed, and he reminded me of a great meme, which is, it's a cartoon of a guy digging underground, and you can see the diamond in front of him, and one of the guys has given up, and the other guy keeps digging, right, and he finds the diamond. And I think that's key, right? If you believe in what you do, if you've got faith in what you do, that's paramount. So, and having faith in your people is so important as well. So, what's the vision, Nishi? What's the vision in terms of where N Accounting's going, where Apex is going, and where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the vision, like, it's always been about giving business owners good quality information and having the right level of discussion and conversation, and nothing's changing with that. It is all about creating great quality content. It's about making great quality numbers available, the right numbers, concise numbers, not loads of numbers, the ones that count, available to the people who need them. And you know, a lot of part of the Apex model is it's meant to be affordable. So we've used a lot of leveraged advisory. I've got junior members of the team involved in that, but they do it very well because we've got really good systems behind it. But it is, ultimately, the vision is to make sure every business has got access to a financial reporting function, really, so they know exactly how much money they're making, they know how their cash flows work, and they know what they need to do to achieve their goals in life in general. So it's, that vision is important. I think even from an accounting point of view, if you don't talk about the reporting and cash flow management and stuff, it's still important, because you can still get accounts work done to a good standard early. So people have got plenty of notice about their tax bills. It's not just about what we do, it's about making sure clients are comfortable with it. So it's about having the right conversations. It's about but you know, it's, the vision is, I think with the Apex, the vision's all about getting people numbers they need and strategy they need to grow. But with our more standard accounting offering, it's just about doing things well in a way where we're really focusing on the customer service, which is, in my opinion, quite often lacking in the industry. But it only works with, part of it is down to the client as well. There's a lot of people out there that just don't want to have a conversation. They just want to be spoon-fed everything. And it's like, we work well with good quality business owners because it's not about necessarily asking the right questions. It's about just saying hello. We can spoon feed you the right questions if you can just pick up a phone and say hello. Sometimes like at least once a quarter we'll do it if they haven't done it to us, and we'll reach out to them and ask them how they're going and all that kind of stuff. But like anything in business, you have to build that relationship. And the people who want to use a supplier without building that relationship, they're never going to get 100% out of it. We'll do everything we can to 100% of the quality we can. But a lot of the value is added just from a conversation. So a bit of advice I'd give to any business owner watching this is just talk to people, ask them, even if you don't know what to ask them, someone you're working with, just ask them how it's going, like what's going on in their business. And they'll probably ask you the same in return. And then if you're open about your challenges, the chances are they'll know how to resolve those challenges if you're talking to the right person.
They'll be able to help in some way, shape or form. It's fascinating, isn't it? Like you say, we don't often pick up the phone. I know in certain regulated businesses you've got consumer duty, and if you think about it, right, like wealth advisory businesses now have to demonstrate that they've had a conversation with their clients once a year, and evidence that should the regulator come knocking. But where is that in the accountancy world, I guess? And you're kind of bringing that level of client care and consumer duty into your business by doing exactly that, picking up the phone and having those conversations. Even if your client doesn't want to have that conversation at that point in time, they know that you care, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way we work is like slightly different to where accountants just have an annual meeting. Like sometimes we might end up having like a monthly meeting. Sometimes we might not have something for a little while. But the key thing is I'd rather have more regular contact in smaller pieces. Like I'd rather have like 4 15-minute phone calls than one 1-hour meeting. Because then you've got an opportunity to just be more current with people, like, what's happened in the last 3 months rather than what happened in the last year. But there is an element of that. I think just going back to what we were talking about earlier, just in terms of some of the challenges in the long-term gain, the long-term game though is ultimately it's all about alignment. Like when you have a particular strategy, and these days what I didn't realize 9 years ago, but what I really do these days is now I'm doing things not just because I want to get clients or just because I want to achieve something. I'm doing them because I believe in them. Right? This podcast exists because those amazing quality conversations I've had with people over the years, they need to be documented because they are conversations with inspiring people that need to be in the public domain. What we do in a lot of the marketing, like creating content, even if I didn't get a client out of it, I would still invest in creating that content because I believe it is aligned to our vision, like give people good quality information. I think some of our clients might ask the question, well, you're giving all this info out for free. Why should we pay you? But I think others would say, you know what? I'd rather work with the person that's capable of originally creating this than someone else who doesn't even think about this stuff. And you're always going to have like a split tribe on that, but it is, you do things because it's part of your vision and your mission, like, and then ultimately you'll stick with them in the long term, and then they'll pay off because the long term stuff does pay off.
It does. It compounds, doesn't it? And positive contributions definitely compound. There's so much in that, and client relationships are fundamental, right? There's training that I deliver specifically around client centricity, and 3 of the things that we cover in that is knowing the client's world. So having an awareness, like you were talking about with that supplier of yours, where you're saying you're not charging me enough, right? I totally get where you're coming from, because you don't want to feel like you're shortchanging somebody else. And more importantly, you respect the value that they're bringing to you. So, and that's the next thing. So you know their world, you have an understanding of pricing points, the market, the challenges, and so on. But then it's about value. So the second point is, how are you bringing value? Before any monetary exchange, where is their value being exchanged? And the last bit is just being present for a client. Like you say, those 15-minute pulse checks, those 4 15-minute pulse checks could be invaluable to a client, because that 1 hour session, great, but in those 15-minute check-ins that you've had, they probably needed one of those conversations. right?
Yeah, I mean, and more importantly, those 15-minute check-ins, we got to train our team to ask the right questions,
Yes.
because they don't always happen with me. But if a member of the team's working with a client or something, then they know what to ask. But have you read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
A long time ago, yes.
Yeah, and it's a great book. And one of the key messages in that is like one of the habits is essentially the win-win.
Yeah.
Like most people believe in win-lose. Like, you know, if they're doing well, I'm doing badly in this deal. Whereas highly successful people or effective people believe in actually there's a way. If they're going to do well, it means I'm going to do well. And you know, that supplier where I had to go back to them and say, hey, we're gonna I need to pay you more because of that. You know, getting a cheap deal is a false economy. Quite a lot of the time, because if then someone else pays them more, or otherwise, if they're too busy worrying about financial issues in the business rather than actually achieving a result for us, then we suffer because of that. So. And quite often, you know, wherever we've been proactive with pay rises, all that kind of stuff in the business. But we just got to, it has to be a win-win scenario. But I think that's a really important takeaway point from that book.
That's a good point. Top book recommendations. All right. So you're saying the last few years you've been swatting up. You've been doing lots of reading. We talked about lots of books. The last QPD that we did, we talked about books as well. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that's up there. What other books would you recommend to business owners?
Shall I give you my top 3?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, my top 3 book recommendations. Number 1, I would say a very long way, is Good to Great by Jim Collins. It is. For some reason, the first half hour, I listened to the audiobook, the first half hour of the book is just awfully boring. And I think that's why, because...
He's explaining it, isn't he? He's explaining the concept behind it.
Exactly, and how he did all his calculations and stuff. And I was like, I kind of switched it off after about 15 minutes. And then I was like, well, I've still got another 11 hours to drive down to Switzerland. So I switched it back on, and then I got through the next 15 minutes.
And your family thoroughly enjoyed that as well, I'm sure.
Well, I had my headphones in, and my daughter, and everyone was on their own tablet. Maybe they were listening to the same thing, but then you stick with it, and then you realize actually why that first half hour is important, because the first half hour says essentially, look, I didn't just pull this stuff out of my ass. This is based on like 10 years of like proper research
and a full team researching it as well.
Exactly. And then it does, and then when you get into the book and you listen to some of the concepts, whereas if you hadn't heard that first half hour, you'd be thinking he did just make this up. Whereas actually when you understand the data behind it, you realize actually this is absolutely amazing stuff, quite possibly the best business book ever written, but it overshadows everything by a country mile. I mean, the concepts in the book, which I guess people should Google or look up or just read the book. But
the flywheel, the hedgehog, Stockdale paradox.
Should I test you on them?
No, don't. But
actually, I mean, I think it'd be really interesting, like, you know, for people watching this. But the flywheel, for example,
discipline, thought.
Yeah, people on the bus, the flywheel, the hedgehog concept, the Stockdale paradox. Stockdale paradox is really important because it's about how the optimists lose. You've got to be the realist. Like, I think you can, when you're a business owner, and you might, if you're having a down day and you go on YouTube and you might put in YouTube like how to be more positive as a business owner, you might see a lot of really general stuff, but actually what you don't see enough people saying is actually it's okay to be a realist. If your situation is bad, then don't convince yourself it's not. Let's deal with your actual situation. Don't bury your head in the sand. The hedgehog concept. There's so many businesses out there just trying to do a little bit of everything, and they really struggle. Like, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll just see that shiny object and chase after it without really thinking about the core message behind their business. Like the flywheel, it's about all these people out there who are just trying to give their team this most inspiring speech that will help turn their team around, but it doesn't work. A good quality team is motivated by good quality performance, and having a good quality team. The people on the bus, you know, disciplined thought by disciplined people. Disciplined action by disciplined people. That is such an important part of running a business. So, did I get all of them? Yes, I think I did.
I think so. So that's number one, good to great.
I would say number two, definitely not the E-Myth. But maybe if I'd read it, you know, in year one of my business rather than year 7, potentially. I think Build to Sell is definitely up there. The story of how Alex Stapleton turned around the Stapleton agency. But it's nowhere close to good to great. And I'd say number 3, or on par with joint number 2 or 3, is definitely got to be The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And, you know, a lot of what by Mark Manson, and a lot of what we talk about in this podcast is about, like, you know, how do you measure success, or how do you really understand what success is? And that's the book that really started triggering my thought process on that. Like, fine, someone sold that business, but is that a success? If someone didn't sell their business and it failed, but what did they achieve in the journey until it failed? You know, what else did they get out of it? Did they make the money they wanted? Did they build the relationships they wanted? And, you know, Mark Manson in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck talks about it a lot.
Yeah.
He's like, he gives examples of this guy who's like really short and can never get a date, and it analyzes how he's self-sabotaging himself because he's set his happiness criteria based on his height, a criteria he can't control. Like the most prevalent example of it in society at the moment is like people that support a football team. Like, that you watch a game of football or a game of rugby and you're happy if your team wins and you're sad if it loses. And you've assigned your happiness to a factor
Something
that is
external.
That's outside of your control.
Yeah.
The news.
Yeah.
I guess, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People talks about your circle of influence and your circle of concern.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties into that book. So I'd say those are the 3, really.
Your top 3. I love it. I love it. Fantastic. What's your biggest challenge right now?
I'd say the biggest challenge at the moment is just getting our marketing message more concise.
Okay.
One of the beautiful things about the Apex program, where we're doing all this financial management stuff, is no other accountants really do it in the same way we do it. But one of the challenges behind that is, like, most business owners don't know they need it. So what we have to really focus on is building a relationship by getting the more compliance-based accounting stuff right, and building a brand behind that, and then talking about the actual business growth with clients that we've already signed up for that. It's very difficult. A lot of people's minds do not compute when an accountant is also talking about business.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe because their perception of the industry is like bean counters shouldn't know about business. They should just give you the beans. And I think there's a lot of damage that's been done to the reputation of our industry over the years, where accountants have just taken the easy option and literally just done the year-end accounts work. And the only way they've been able to achieve that is just by being cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And then over time, what's happened is they can't afford a team. So essentially, they're undercutting a lot of good quality accounting businesses, but at the same time, they're also not training anyone themselves. There is a shortage of accountants. Like, you know, do I think there's pricing pressure? That's a limiting belief, actually. But what I do think is, if you've got a good accounting team, there's not many other firms out there there are many other firms, but relative to the demand for accountancy work, there isn't as many accountants that are being trained and required, as is required. So it's really one of the big challenges is talking about our industry in a better light, and then getting people's attention on talking about our industry in a better light, but then easing them into how accountants can help you grow your business rather than just keep HMRC off and Companies House off your back.
Yeah. And there's no one out there offering something like Apex, is there? That you're aware of?
There are, but for different niches in different ways. So it's, the Apex model is all about community. So we run our quarterly planning day together. That's really important for me because the successful business owners, I know how lonely they are. You're talking about 1 in 36 people of working adults. So by actually having that community where we get business coaches and leadership coaches like yourself in, where we can actually run those activities, but more importantly, get them an opportunity to spend time together. That's actually really important for me anyway. But it also has that marketing bonus as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. Well, look, I mean, I've got a ton of other questions, but I'm conscious of time.
So, we'll come back for a part 2 if people like this podcast.
I'd love to. Absolutely.
Or they might just be sick of listening to me for another hour. If anyone wants to see another hour and a half of me answering the rest of Steve's questions, then just comment below or drop me a message.
Hit like and subscribe, everybody.
Exactly.
That's a wrap. Thanks very much, Nishi.
Thank you for having me on my podcast.